Hi folks, this is Mr. Deep and welcome. Today the question is, where did we come from? Of course we have the ape ancestor theory, and I would encourage you to look into Lloyd Pye's work because he proves rather conclusively that there is no missing link. That guy's name is Lloyd Pye. Furthermore, he states that there's 10 very significant differences between a primate and a human. And he also talks about, this is quite interesting, chromosome number 2. And what's unique with chromosome number 2 is that it's a fused chromosome. Now, according to Darwinian evolution, that would take 10 million years to occur. But I would suggest, and I'm not the only one, the other possibility is that this fusion is evidence of genetic modification. In other words, there's not just GM food, but maybe we are GM ourselves. The other thing I find interesting that kind of smells of GM is that there is apparently 4,000 defects in the human genome. Now, regarding the Sumerian texts, the gods or aliens, depending on what you want to call them, they modified the existing Earth species. And the question that I think is important to ask is, let's say we were modified, engineered. What were we before that? Were we a lower species, or were we a higher species? And I think we also have to be very careful with ancient history because, even if we break down the word history, his story, we already know in recent times that history is written by the victors, and who's to say that more powerful beings also don't put forward histories that are rather subjective rather than accurate in order to suit their own needs. So on the one hand, maybe we are created or genetically modified in the image of our gods, aliens. Yet most people would be aware that humans have this junk DNA. Some people call it the unplugged DNA. Now, an interesting guy I have referenced in other videos is Wes Penray. And what he talks about is the species before this genetic manipulation. And he calls this species the Namlu. Now, the Namlu were less dense, they were taller, they were multi-dimensional, they were nano-travelers, so they, with their mind, could travel any part of the universe. And when I say universe, that would be the 100% universe, because from his point of view, the universe that we know of, even though it's vast, is 4% of the actual universe itself. And he also says that these Namlu, or us in the past, were protected by Titans. But there was a war in heaven, or you could say an invasion. And these days there's a lot of talk about our universe or reality being a virtual reality or a simulation or a computer simulation. Now, one thing I want you to consider is that if you were a powerful creator God, but maybe not the... Now, what I'd like us to consider that if you're a God that can create or modify a universe and reveal just 4% of that universe. One of the ways to do it effectively is to take the species, let's say on Earth, and modify them genetically so that they only perceive 4% of the universe. Okay, so there's just some ideas for you. Now, these are things I can't necessarily prove. Some of these ideas, but what I do know from direct personal experience is that if you're human, you have a divine code or divine DNA, and when it is activated, it connects you to not the many gods that we see and are told about in our religions, but the God of the 100%, the true creator, you could say. And the reason why this divine creator is different is because when this DNA code is properly and truly activated, you'll find that none of the stories, the spiritual paths, and the gods quite fit with this emerging divine DNA activation that's occurring within you. And you may ask me the question, am I suggesting that spiritual awakening involves DNA change or genetic change? And the answer to me is yes. So as I said, if you're human, you have this divine code or DNA which needs to be activated, but the tragedy is most people have it very well buried or certainly not activated. And it takes a special kind of effort to sprout this seed or activate this code. And if you are looking for a place to start, I really recommend the Gnosis 1, 2, and 3. They're books written by Moraviev. Now, there's a Christian gloss to it, but if you put that aside and just have a look at, because it gets very much into the emotional, psychological, and spiritual process of activating this DNA that is divine. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And the interesting thing with this divine code is when it's activated, when you connect with a divine creator outside of the matrix or our modified universe, you at the same time, so even though it's outside, it's inside, which I find very interesting. And as this divine character is revealed, as I said, there's no real fit in the gods that are presented to us. It's not to say they're completely corrupt, but there's a mixture. There's divine and anti-divine traits within the one God, and I think that's deliberate to confuse us. For example, the mixing of love and fear within religion, when perfect love drives out fear. I would say also that when this DNA is activated, it's not just everything lands in your plate, it's something continues to yearn, and that, so basically one tends to really seek knowledge and understanding. So there's effort involved into really placing and understanding this DNA code awakening correctly. And what I would say about all of this is that there's many people who don't think there's a matrix or think it's make-believe or sci-fi, and that's essentially because the matrix is invisible to you. It's present all the time, it's everywhere, as the movie says. But unless you are waking up or posing a threat to this system, this program, it will always seem invisible. It's only when you start to take the steps to wake up that you suddenly realize that you're in a prison, that you're in a matrix, you're in a illusory program or system. And I think one thing to be careful of too is what's happening a lot in the world today is, look, the average person knows that there's a control system, and then those who are reading more, they're like, wow, actually it's a matrix control system. And so the unfortunate thing is a lot of these people are really getting into the trying to escape an external matrix. However, the inner matrix is still their prison. And so they're out there fighting this external matrix while their inner matrix, the demons are still running around. So it's important to really break the inner matrix in order to then engage in the external matrix. So the conclusion to this is, where do we come from? Hopefully I've given you some things to think about, and what I can testify as a direct experience is that a human has divine DNA. When activated, it connects us with the divine creator. So the task is to wake up. Thank you.